We'll take it away. All right, Mandy, are you tell me when you hit record. Recording. Hey everyone out there. Thank you for joining us for the Family Treatment Court Zoom webinar with Latrell, Gullotta, and Judge Cole. They're going to tell you a bit about our program.
Let me just start out very briefly, and I want to thank y'all for taking a minute to listen to what Family Treatment Court does for the families and children in juvenile court. It's important for CASA to know and understand what we do. The role you guys play is incredible when it comes to the changes that are made for children. I'm going to let Latrell do our presentation, and then I'm going to talk to you for just a minute about the judge's perspective and how the program, how I see the program impacting children and families, and then also be available for any questions. You know, normally we're gathered in a room together when we do this presentation with y'all, and we can talk and share more, but I'm going to make time to be sure that you can ask me some questions. So Ms. Gullotta is our coordinator. Before she was our coordinator, she was our case manager. So she's been working with our program for quite a while. And a neat thing is when I first came on the bench 5 years ago, Susan was our CASA member on the team. We use a team approach, and Latrell's going to talk to you about that, I'm sure. And then she was followed by Mandy, who had also been on the team as a DFACS family preservation case manager. And then now Susan's back. So we appreciate having everybody from CASA working so hard with us. So here's Latrell Gullotta. Oh, and you're on mute.
Yes, I was unmuting myself. I do apologize. I do have someone cutting my yard right now as we speak, and I'm trying to, hopefully we'll finish this side so we can go forward. I'm going to be sharing the screen, so you'll see our PowerPoint presentation. And as Judge Cole stated, everybody that's on this face, we are aware of because they have been a part of this mission and part of our team for a long time. I'm happy to work with everybody that's on this call and look forward to future endeavors with everybody that's possible going to be a part of our cases. So let's get started. I'm going to share the screen and it's going to be our presentation. Mandy, I need you to disable. Thank you. All right, I want to get started with accountability court. I want to basically give you a brief history. We had, I would say the early 1990s, we had two courts that were looking at their dependency cases. And one of the things they discovered that many of their dependency cases, and I'm talking about the family treatment court side, many of their dependency cases had substance abuse exposure in it. Many of those children were exposed to parents that had substance abuse issues. So what they did is in 1995, they jointly pretty much created family treatment courts. Family treatment court is one of 6 accountability courts. And I'm going to say the names of the accountability courts, and you may be familiar with some of those. One of them being DUI, veteran, mental health. We have juvenile mental health, family treatment court, and we also have superior court drug court. So those are the 6 accountability courts that we have. And fortunately, we have all of those in Chatham County. I'm going to go ahead and start with accountability courts. In 2011, the state of Georgia had around a dozen accountability courts. But today, in 2020, we have like 164. That is a big jump. You think about the timeline, the evolution of accountability courts, but this is the direct result of our courts evolving and how we truly affect lives. Substance abuse affects so many lives. Also, there was a study done in 2017. How does Georgia benefit from accountability courts? So they actually took some raw data that they had. They studied over, it was the CACJ, which is in the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, which is CJCC. Believe me, those two acronyms I had to learn what they meant. But also they partnered with Carl Vinson Institute of Government to conduct analysis of over 1,729 adult accountability courts, which are the ones that I stated, on their graduates in the fiscal year 2017. And that analysis found that accountability courts was estimated to have generated 38.2 million, not thousand, million in economic benefits to Georgia. And I'm going to show you the chart that actually include that. This is the economic impact and benefits of that. The points that I really want you to look at is the main one that we will be really included. We'll actually be included in most of those, but the ones that we really will be included is the 3.9 million in foster care system, the cost avoided. That's a huge amount. One of the big missions also include the healthcare and the fees for prison or jail time. So we definitely have impacted how the system is ran and also how lives are changed as a result of accountability courts. We are Chatham County Family Treatment Court. We're under juvenile court system and we are a dependency court system. Our mission is to achieve safe and permanent families for children by addressing the dependency resulting from substance abuse or addiction of a parent or caregiver. I often look at that mission each time that I go to staffing, each time I go to court, and also I remind myself of that mission when I'm speaking with our participants, because that mission is for the safe and permanent families for children. So we're looking at the children. At the end result is the children. So we need to make sure that focus is always forefront. And that plays a role with CASA as well, a huge role. Here's some statistics from Family Treatment Court. Chatham County Family Treatment Court has been in operation since January 2008. And since that time, we've served 117 parents. We had over 256 children. We have had 50 parents to graduate and 55 parents that were terminated, with 18 parents surrendering their rights or their rights being terminated. We've also prevented children from coming into care. So they came into our program with their parents and they left our program with their parents, versus them going into foster care system and they're saving that cost for entering the foster care system. Our program currently serves 12 participants and our capacity is up to 25. So we can serve a maximum of 25 participants at a time. Almost 95% of our participants have had sexual trauma in their childhood. And that goes to our next slide. Our customers are the children of drug addicted parents. I'm going to show you all a small video about babies that were born addicted to drugs. So you can actually see, and you'll get the point of view from different aspects, from the doctor, from the nurse, as well as a parent. So I want to give you that information, and you can, the video is probably about 6 minutes long. So take it in and observe some of the points that they're talking about, especially from the perspective of the parent and how her life has been affected from substance abuse, as well as see this child.
syndrome, which essentially is a baby that's withdrawing from medication, either because we gave the medicine to the baby because they were very sick, or they're withdrawing from a medication that the mother took, or a street drug which she takes, or a combination, and many times it's polydrug use.
I started smoking marijuana at 11 years old. From there, it went to pills. And when I was 15 was when I first started using coke. At the beginning of my pregnancy, I was using marijuana and heroin. They did test him. They said that me and him both had THC in our system. But they said that he was having withdrawal.
What they like better is when they're more contained and they're not flailing out. They like to be very contained and secure. Oops, there we go. It's okay. Well, we'll monitor the scores, and if they don't come down, then we'll go ahead and start them on the methadone. If he's not sleeping, the less amount of sleeping he does, the higher the score. If he's having lots of tremors, both disturbed and undisturbed, his muscle tone. This is if he's got an increased moro, any excoriation, like he had some on his bottom, the jerkiness, or any seizure activity, which he has not had. His temp has been fine this last time. Frequent yawning and nasal flaring, which he has not exhibited. And then here we've got the nasal stuffiness or sneezing. He has an excessive suck, and I'm going to mark him for poor feeding this time because he was a very, very sloppy eater. He just had a little bit of vomiting just a few minutes ago. He's got loose stools, so his scores are going to be pretty high this time. Would you like a pacifier? You notice his little chin is excoriated. Oh, there's jerking. Yeah. Would you like your pacifier? They do like to suck, and it does help them calm down a little bit.
It seems as though we're being hit by many, many mothers who are on pain medications that have become addicted. In order to help the mother, we've then put the mothers on medication, specifically methadone or some of them Suboxone, and then we're seeing the babies withdraw from the medicine that the mother has to take. So there is a great need for them, a need for getting off the drugs, a need for emotional support, work support, any support that you can give them, because obviously they have reasons for what happened to them as well. Opioid addiction is relatively new in our country. We're seeing a lot of it.
Oh. Here's the shelf. Got it. Here, I'm Grace. Hi, I'm your baby's nurse. How are you? I'm all right. All right. Well, you come on in. I'll go ahead and get a screen. I heard you want to breastfeed. That'd be a little bit, huh? Here we go.
Well, my mom, she was an addict, and I'd take care of her when she'd have alcohol poisoning, and so I felt a lot of neglect from that, and a lot of anger for having to take care of her, and I had encountered a lot of sexual abuse from people that were around me.
We have to do something to help these moms and not just blame the moms. The moms have to be empowered to be able to take care of their children, and they care about their babies. You can tell they do. It's just I feel like they don't know which way to turn, and I think that as a society we need to help them figure out a way. We have a lot of babies that are withdrawing, a lot of babies that are going to be developmentally delayed because of this. So we're going to have a whole society of children of drug addicted moms that are going to have learning disabilities, developmental disabilities, physical disabilities. And we are going to have to start paying attention as a whole in the United States.
And I'm sure you all probably have some questions from that video, and we can talk about those at the end. Other challenges of these children include fetal alcohol syndrome, growth disorders, impaired growth, their heart, kidney, and bone problems, learning disabilities and low IQ, trouble with memory, coordination, and attention, problems with sleep and suckling, as well as infants. Problems often get worse with age. You will see a child that has been born on substances in about third grade, 10 years old. They're now in a structured classroom. And now they're required to do some things that they didn't have to do before in terms of that structured classroom. And that's when you'll start seeing some of these behaviors come out. ADHD, which is a common theme, and also PTSD. The babies and the children in our FTC program are usually born, sadly, addicted to opioids, methadone, THC, cocaine, or they had it in their system as during the pregnancy or at birth. A number of the babies require heart surgery. Most require detox. And I don't know if anybody else on this call or in this training has seen a baby that was born on substances and they had to actually withdraw this baby and give them medication. I have personally, and it's not a nice sight to see, an innocent child come in this world that has to struggle from day one. The later a participant comes into our program after losing their children, the more challenging it is for that parent and child to bond. That comes with, again, we're talking about someone who has been using substance for probably 10 years. And I say 10 years, as you heard on that video, that mom said she started using at the early age of 12. So we're talking about 11, 12, 13, and now she's in her 20s. That's still, you add those years up, you got timeline behind that. So it's important that we try to reach and get that parent and child connected as soon as possible so that bond can start. Foster parents may be resistant to relinquishing the child, and that comes with them having that commitment, that bond with the child. But we haven't seen that so much, but it's also, it's just you getting used to somebody being in your home all the time. The children and parent almost always need therapy, especially with the older children, because again, they're trying to reconnect, and the person that child necessarily knew before is not the same person that they now know clean and sober. Some parents have more children than they can initially handle. If you're talking about a young mom that has 3 to 4, 5 to 6 children, that's a challenge in itself, because now they have to connect with not only the 2 or the 3, they're connecting with 5 or 6. That is a challenge. Identifying the father is often problematic. Sad to say, we definitely know who the mother is, but the father is not always readily available. This is a brain on drugs. We got the non-drug user, and then we have the drug abuser. And I say drug abuser, these terminologies have also changed throughout time. It was a drug abuser, a substance abuser. Now we're trying to be more friendlier with how we state that. So we're gonna say someone that is on substances at this time versus the abuser. Oops, sorry. Addiction is not a choice. It is a brain disease. And I don't know how many times I've gone into a room with individuals and had a brief conversation with people just about addiction. And often you'll get it's something by choice. I can choose to get off the drugs today. I can start yesterday and I can get off today. That is often not the case. It is a brain disease. When use of drugs cross the line from abuse to addiction, it affects the area of the brain responsible for primitive drive for survival, such as breathing. That is, I can't express to you how important that is to know. Certain drugs affect different parts of the brain, and something that we are often going to many trainings, and one of the trainings that we went to probably within the last few years talked about heroin and how heroin affects the entire brain. And can you imagine thinking of something, only one thing to survive each day? Drinking, eating, but the only thing that you're thinking about is that drug. Your children can be sitting right there. That is not your primary thought. Your primary thought is that drug. So memory addiction never leaves. So even once sober, if relapse occurs at any point, the addiction quickly escalates to where it was before. That is a real statement, because often people think if they decide to use after being off of drugs from some time, that they'll just have the control to just stop immediately. That is not the case. Your brain has that memory. Much like diabetes, it is a disease that must be managed medically and includes many lifestyle changes. Often you'll hear people, places, and things. That is also something that they learn, that they have to make the lifestyle change to include people, places, and things. We talked about trauma before. Childhood trauma is highly correlated to addictive disease. Emotional, physical, and sexual trauma, especially physical and sexual, it alters memory and damages the limbic system. I wanted to define parts of the limbic system. It is the key functions of your emotions, your memories, and arousal. This system has several parts, which definitely is above the brainstem and within the cerebellum. The limbic system connects parts of the brain that deal with high and low functions. So you need to definitely keep that in mind. These are functions of the brain that we often use, of course, on a regular basis. So we need to make sure that if these are being affected, that person also understands that to some degree. So once they're in some type of education, they're explained that as well. Trauma is a result in a constant state of stress throughout one's life. That person has trouble modulating their emotions and either becomes very angry and fearful or disassociates and becomes numb. Self-destructive behaviors are common in women, and sexual abuse. It's also in men, but it's more common in women. May include sexual promiscuity, self-harm, such as cutting, etc. Challenges of drug-addicted parents. In addition to the challenges described with the brain and the trauma, they often have lost everything, including their children. They require lengthy treatment to increase their chances of recovery. They must have a life plan of recovery, and they need to help programming their brain throughout incentives and responses to their behavior, which is sanctions offered by our court. They may require help in every area of their life, to include basic life skills such as food, shelter, transportation, education, and employment. And that goes into what we actually do. We benefit them overall in every aspect of their life. When they come into our program, we learn almost everything to know about them. So often what I state to them in the beginning is, if you're considered a private person, that privacy is pretty much on hold right now while you're in our program. The benefits of our family treatment court program is treatment for family and child. It helped with jobs. We help with job skills, resume writing, employment, financial planning. We help with housing, food, clothing, and transportation. Visitation can be increased. Support at panel reviews, parent attorney. Increase influence through direct contact with those who can help them influence the outcome of their child is the team. Some cases, our families come in with a dysfunctional background of people that they have been around. And our team become that support system. We don't always think that's a positive thing because we want them to create a better community, but initially we are a big influence on their life. Direct contact with the judge may be ultimately make the final decision regarding reunification. So they have that constant contact with our judge. Daily support from the family treatment staff in addition to clinical and treatment staff. So on an average, our participants, I do apologize. On an average, our participants are communicating on a daily basis with either me, my case manager, treatment staff, defect staff. So they are pretty much very well tied to with the support system of our court program. The other benefits is they reunify with children and parents at a faster rate due to service oversight. And the service oversight, we're talking about community surveillance, voluntary defects, FTC staff, and so on. It is a voluntary entrance, and it's an 18-month minimum time frame program. So everybody that comes in our program, it is voluntary that they enter our program. We don't mandate they come in, but they have the choice to come in. Eligibility must be a resident of Chatham County, and they must be a legal and primary caretaker of a child involved with defects. And I say defects. Must have dependency allegations arising from substance abuse or dependency. I say that, but sometimes cases may come in with physical abuse or some other type of abuse that doesn't include substance abuse. But once the defects become involved with the family and they recognize that substance abuse is a major factor in that family, that will also be an indicator. We will look at that case then. There are some exclusionary criteria. They cannot be the perpetrator or co-conspirator of a sexual abuse, of a serious physical abuse of a child. They cannot be the perpetrator of a serious violent crime. They cannot have medical or psychological conditions that would hinder the person's ability to participate in treatment. They cannot have chronic or terminal medical conditions that require extensive medical treatment. And they cannot have legal circumstances that would interfere with their ability to engage in treatment. That last one, I often give the example of if they commit a crime and they're sentenced to 2 to 5 years in prison, then we cannot afford, or we will not have the obligation to work with them and effectively get them back on track with their children in a time frame that is required of them. We also have incentives for compliance and recovery. Compliance is appearance in court. We want them coming to court every single thing, every date that they're required to come. We want them completing a weekly paperwork package. That weekly paperwork package includes their goals, their finances. We want to know what their income coming in and their income going out. They're also their AANA attendance, as well as establishing a sponsor. We want them all establishing a sponsor, because when it's all said and done, when all of these agencies have left them, they will still have an individual that could support them down the road if a relapse is heading their way. And that person they can count on and call on and get that communication, that line of communication that will help them walk them through out of it. We do weekly drug screens, progress in their education, work readiness, and employment and completion of sanctions. Recovery is honesty, respect, accountability, and efforts also need to be reinforced with incentives. So we make sure that they are attending their treatment as required. Honesty is a huge part of our program because if they're not honest basically with others, they're not being honest to themselves. So we make sure we stress that because you're not going to be able to move forward if you're not trying to be honest. Incentives may include verbal praise from the judge, a happy basket prize, financial incentives, gift cards, household items, special opportunity to participate in events, promotion to an advanced phase level with less restrictions. And our happy basket is set up like this. They have to submit those weekly paperwork. And if they submit the weekly paperwork of the goals, the finances, their sponsor, their AAs in a timely manner, because they have to submit it by a deadline on a specific date each week, then their name will go in that happy basket. And at the end of each month, we'll pull a prize out of that incentive. And I say happy basket, fishbowl. Their name will go in our fishbowl. It's an actual fish bowl. And their name will go in it each time they submit those weekly paperwork. The happy basket includes stuff like if we commemorate them or we applaud them on getting a new job, if they just completed a training. We want to make sure that we are focusing on complimenting them on many of the things and challenges that they've done in their life and all of the things that they're working towards, because often they have been around people that they haven't got the positive reinforcement. So we want to make sure that behavior modification is focused on the positive as much as we can. We do have sanctions. So when they're not doing really good in our program and they have the challenges that they're facing of still testing positive, they're not attending court, or they're not attending treatment, they do have sanctions, and our sanctions are graduated sanctions. Those are the things that we pretty much enforce more, I would say harder on, are the ones that I just named: attending court, attending treatment, and drug screens. We want to make sure that they're negative, but when they start testing positive and the relapse happen, then we are looking at a definite sanction, and that sanction can start off with a verbal admonishment, written assignment, increased court appearances, a curfew, community service, and electronic monitoring. And the ultimate one is jail time. We are still using it, but of course, during this time, we're not able to use it due to what's going on in the world. We currently have 6 phases in our program. So when they come into our program, they start out, they are informed that we have a total of 6 phases. And I want to state what the phases are before we go into each one of them individually. And I'm not going to go over every requirement on each phase, but I do want to show you what it looks like. So the 6 phases include orientation in phase 1. They're lumped together. It's 30 days each for the orientation, and it's 30 days for the phase 1. And then it goes to phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and phase 5. After phase 5, you're graduating our program. And that's where the 18-month minimum come in. We have 30 days, 30 days, 4 months, 4 months, 4 months. So phase 1. Phase 1, we're basically trying to meet the participant where they are in their disease and focus on detox and treatment. We're getting them acclimated to the process, the program, the structure. This is not asking them a whole lot. We just want them to get acclimated to it. And I know Judge Cole may want to say something about what he asked them up front. Is the 2 things that I want you to do is to be honest and be where you're supposed to be. And those two things, they will repeat it back to you, because that's all we're asking them to do initially. We're not trying to put too much pressure on, because it is a lifestyle change. When they come into our program, they are changing their lives, because whatever they did before did not work. So we're here to try and help them change that for the better. So we want to meet them where they are in their disease and focus on. So often when people come in our program, people ask, are they still on drugs? More than likely, some of them are still testing positive. Fortunately, that's just the case. So like I said, it's orientation is 30 days and phase 1 is 30 days. They have to go to daily treatment, follow all rules and regulations of that treatment provider. I'm going to say what treatment includes group sessions, case management, individual counseling, and more recognition therapy. And I put this on here because I noticed that I didn't have a whole lot about more recognition therapy. That is a behavior modification, cognitive behavioral approach therapy that they're focusing on the criminal thinking piece behind. Often participants, and not just participants, but they're in the mindset of how can they get away with something, or what can they do to get this drug, and it may be some criminal acts or some criminal thinking to get that drug. That program, that training, that therapy teaches them how to change their mindset to get away from that. And everybody, and I mean everybody that I know have gone through that has stated that it has benefited them tremendously, not only in ways of how they change the way they think, but it forces them to stop and think something separately, or think in a different way. So it helps a whole lot. AANA is a requirement. They have to go 3 times a week in that first phase. Weekly court and meeting with the team. I'm going to state all of this, but at the end, you'll see that I'm going to also state some of our new regulations regarding the changes due to the pandemic. But I'll go ahead and state what we were doing prior to the pandemic. Weekly court and meeting with the team, compliance with judicial responses, recommendations of the team, cooperation with defects. They need to have that case plan developed early on in that, and regarding visitation with the children. Something that I have noticed that we are always on top of making sure our parents visit their children. Sometimes it's a delay from that PPH hearing to the adjudication hearing and disposition hearing about visitation, but once they're in our program, we make sure that those visitations are occurring timely and they're attending promptly. Initial plan to stabilize lifestyle, housing, and employment. We want them to develop that. We want them to start thinking in the future. That weekly goals that we ask them to write is pretty much they're setting up what it's going to look like for the next week. So initially we have them start thinking about what they need to do that next week. So, but then we want them to take it another step with that initial plan to stabilize their lifestyle, housing, and their employment. And everybody in our program has a curfew. We have 2 curfews, a 9 p.m. curfew and a 10 p.m. curfew, and it's based on the phase that you're in. Phase 2, when we get to phase 2, we're implementing the plan to stabilize lifestyle. We have them start looking at housing, employment, because in that phase 1, in that orientation, which is just 30 days, and then the phase 1 is another 30 days. If they're in residential treatment, then in that 30 days, they're not going to be allowed the permission to go look for a job. They are responsible for making sure their focus is on treatment. We will allow the visitations, but our focus is on establishing some type of routine and structure for treatment. So their primary mission in that beginning set of phases is really to get themselves sober, as well as focus on the process of treatment. So in phase 2 is implementing the plan again. And in this phase, this is where the minimum change. The minimum of this time frame in this phase is 4 months. Again, they're doing the AA and ACE, but at this phase also, we're going to be looking at them attending our evidence-based parenting program called Celebrating Families. Celebrating Families is set up for our participants, and our participants majority only. So people that are not in our program may not get this same program. But Celebrating Families is an evidence-based parenting program that incorporates the entire family. It's set up that the parents and the children come together in a site facility that they're sitting down, and they sit down and have a meal together. There have been studies on parents and children having meals together, how they affect their everyday life. And they have found in some of those studies that just sitting down having a meal reduces the likelihood that your child will go out and commit crimes. At that session, they're sitting down having a meal, having real conversations about their day. And then after the meal, they separate into age-appropriate sessions that they're discussing how substance abuse has affected their lives in an age-appropriate manner. And it can be a 5-year-old. It can be a 10-year-old. And then the parents are going to parents groups that other parents, the 5-year-old and the 10-year-olds are going to around children that have also experienced something similar regarding substance abuse. But they're also talking about how a healthy, happy family looks, ways that this family can now come together and become that healthy family. So it started out with talking about how substance abuse has affected the family, but now we're going into how the family can benefit, and also how this family can become stable. We want our parents also to obtain employment and have a budget in place. By phase 3, this is relapse prevention techniques and coping skills to help participants successfully manage recovery and everyday family issues. By this phase, they are really are ready for them to look at those issues. When they start treatment, they're already looking at a relapse prevention tool. They're going over some things that they should be looking at in terms of the triggers and who they should be around. They do an overview of that. But once they get the phase 3 in our FTC program, we want them revisiting that relapse prevention technique and actually putting it into practice so we can see how that looks. They're now coming to court twice a month. And also they are probably more than likely completing that parenting program of the Celebrating Families. They've had increased visitation or their children are already with them. And something that I didn't mention I want to add is we work with both families that the children are in foster care as well as parents that have custody of their children. So we're going to work with them in maintaining that custody. So when we put visitation or return of children on here, these parents can already have custody of their children. So they can do our entire program with custody of their children in their home. So we're trying to maintain that piece. Phase 4, again, we're continuing the use of recovery tools, coping skills, and managing everyday family skills. This phase should be used to apply the tools learned. We want them, again, apply those tools learned if they have not yet fully mastered them from phase 3. Again, it's a minimum of 4 months. So you're talking about, and I don't know if you've, I mentioned it, but in these later phases, they have to have 90 days of consecutive clean drug screens in order for them to move to the next phase. And we also empower them when it's time to move phases. So each time they have to move phase, they have to put a request in. It's called a phase up package. They have to submit all of the things that they did in that current phase that they're in order for them to move to the next phase. So they have to provide proof, community support hours, community service hours. They have to do all of that in order for them to move to the next phase. So it empowers them, gives them the the title of, yes, I had some input in this. So we make sure that they're empowered to do so by submitting that package. And then we have to approve it. In phase 5, we're to still continue that coping skills and managing everyday family skills. Now in phase 5, and I have / aftercare, they're reporting to court once a month at this phase. So again, we're maintaining custody of all their children. In phase 4, they should have their kid or be about to gain custody of their children. In phase 5, they should have them, period. Whether they still have them from day one being in our program or they were in foster care. At this phase, their children should be with them. It's not always automatic that you think that the children will be unified with them, but it's a work in progress, and that progress depends on that individual participant. Now, we talked about each phase of our program. Now I want to give you a little update of what some of the practices in our operation we're doing for COVID-19. FTC staffing in court is held virtually twice a month on the first and the third Tuesday. The participants right now are required to attend in person or virtually a minimum of 3 AANA meetings weekly. So if they were in phase 4 and they were doing once a week or twice a week, they are required now through all of this to attend 3 times a week, because we're finding that the less connected that they are, the less likely they can fall into old behavior, and we want to make sure that they don't do that. They're attending court twice a month regardless of what phase. So if they were in phase 4, again, they have to still attend court twice a month. The ones that were attending court once a month, we are still focused on them with our case management meetings. They have to report to our FTC case manager every single week, regardless of what phase they're in. They have to attend in-person telehealth counseling sessions each week, attend in-person or virtual substance abuse treatment sessions. It can be day treatment, night treatment, MRT, or aftercare. And I know that all of those, because it depends on where they're at in treatment. Again, I stated before, they can be in residential, they can be in outpatient, or they can be in aftercare. So if they're in any of those aspects of the treatment program, they can be attending day, night, MRT, or aftercare. They must comply with DFACS, CASA, and any additional services to the family. And they must attend visitation with their children and demonstrate parenting skills. So we're not just making sure that they're attending visitation, but we want to see that they're able and capable of demonstrating those skills, whether the food that they bring for the visit, whether the time they spent, if the child does something inappropriate, how they're managing that. So we want to make sure those type of skills are being performed and people are witnessing it and being able to say, yes, this person is definitely doing what they're supposed to do. I do apologize. I did skip one slide that included each member of our team.
And you know what, Latrell, I'll talk about that just a little. I know we're getting towards the end of our time, so if you leave that slide up.
Okay.
I want to make sure we have time if there are any questions.
Okay.
But I just wanted to share briefly that from the judge's perspective, what I see and what the other judges in juvenile court see time and again is this intergenerational cycle. And Latrell alluded to it. You heard it in the video, but we have families where the parents are suffering from substance abuse disorder. Their children, 15 years later, are back here with the same issue, and then they're back here with their children. And that's really the thing that I want us to focus on and be sure that we're ending. And the neat thing about an accountability court is it puts structure around a participant so that with all of the verification and checking we do by having them come to court regularly, having them frequently drug screened, having them talk to the coordinator all the time, the case manager, their treatment provider, community policing, they are regularly in a position that if they start using again, there's somebody that's going to see it, and we can bring them back to court and address that. Latrell talked a little bit about it too, but the parents that come to our court, we only take high needs people, and the parents generally have no parenting skills, that they've never parented sober, they have not worked generally. We'll have people 30 years old with no work history yet. You know, they've suffered extreme trauma, and it's debilitating for them. And it basically pushes the substance abuse to the front of their lives. And they've never been part of a family that's functioned well. And so we're building frequently a family dynamic, and this program's able to do it. What happens with the court process is, and I love being able to get to solutions as a judge. And the beauty of this program is it brings everybody together. It brings the judge, the coordinator, the case managers, DFACs, CASA, and then all the lawyers involved, and brings everybody together so that every week when we're meeting, we're looking at the issues and saying, what do we need to do to solve this problem? Or how do we move from where we are to the next step? And it's a great tool for doing that. The role that CASA can play is, in our court system, most people have an attorney who's advocating for their specific and unique rights. But CASA is there arguing for what's best for the kids. And CASAs develop a relationship with the child. CASAs develop a relationship with the family. And they're in a unique position to urge and encourage people to go down this path towards having a healthy life, as well as a happy and functioning family. I see that Pam has a question, and she wants to know what happens when a person has an opportunity to get a job, but court dates on Tuesday or group meetings are interfering with a new opportunity that she thinks may be better for that person. And so what the court does is, and we certainly get it, if for a lot of jobs, you are taking off every Tuesday afternoon is really challenging. But where most of our people are coming from is they're in a position that the underlying supports in their life do not exist in order to long-term work or to do other things like be a parent and just function in a healthy way. And so in the beginning, what takes priority is always treatment. As we move forward, we work really hard to accommodate people's work, because work is also something that's helpful and beneficial. And so we'll have people, especially during COVID times, appear by WebEx on their phone from their job. Their boss gives them 20 minutes to go in the back room, and they get on our call and participate with us that way. So, you know, as they move through treatment, and treatment recommends that they go to, that it's okay to work, that will be an option, and we'll support that. And then we do have, you know, Latrell receives calls from people still, I think, from 10 years ago. So there is support from us there. Recovery Place is really strong as a treatment provider. And they are always, their door sort of stays open for people. But what we try to do is to help them develop a sober support network so that they have, independent of court, people to be there for them. But our court, you know, because we care about the people and want them to succeed, are always there. And then there's another question about how many do-overs does a participant get before they're terminated? You know, we look at each case individually, and a lot of what we look at is, you know, the science is really strong here. So we look at proximal and distal abilities. Proximal meaning what can they actually accomplish right now in their circumstances. And what Latrell talked about was, in the beginning, I require people to show up for court and to be honest with me. And for a lot of people, everything else in their life is so chaotic that that's really all they can accomplish. At some point, however, you know, you start to balance when do the interests of a child to permanency start outweighing the parental role and the parental rights. And that's always a balance. You know, we try to work with every parent as much as possible. And I do appreciate the fact that the CASAs have taken time. I really do miss the opportunity to get with y'all and be in the same room and walk around and talk to you. CASAs are invaluable. You guys have an amazing program and an amazing group of leadership. And I look forward to y'all completing your training and getting sworn in.
Thank you all for having us. I mean, it's been a pleasure talking to you all. I hope the information that you got is something that you can take with you. And if you're not sure about something, you have two key players on that on your team, Miss Mandy and Miss Susan, that definitely, even if they can't answer, they'll make sure they get that answer for you regarding our program. So.
No, and I appreciate it. And there was one last question. I know that Latrell and I actually need to go in a minute, but a question about the racial breakdown of participants. And that's something that we do monitor. And it's always been a little bit interesting in that in our program, this is anecdotally, we will literally one year have almost everyone will be African American and then 2 years later, you know, it's 80% Caucasian. And it just seems to swing back and forth. Part of it may be tied to the drugs that are most common and or enforcement by defects. You know, we have not been able to pin down exactly why, but it is something that we're cognizant of, and we certainly want services to be available to everybody. And we want to work with everybody from wherever they start to having a healthy family and permanency for our kids. So I appreciate Kate and Mandy and Maggie and Tim and Sharon and all the other folks at CASA. And thank you, Latrell, for putting on the presentation. Y'all take care, okay?
Thank you. Y'all have a good day.